if I was kind of trying to give myself advice 10, 15, 20 years ago, I would have just advised myself to maybe not do as much of the work that I thought was going to make my editors happy. The stuff that I
Mm.
was shooting and doing to simply, you know, keep kind of the machine, moving forward. And I, because I realized that the moment that I started to pursue projects, stories, photographs, places, locations, um, that were giving me more excitement, more passion, I found more success in my career, mainly because stuff felt different. And for me, that took me to the Arctic, and it took me to places like Norway and Iceland, Alaska, and to search for waves and surf and stories. And that was very much against the grain of what kind of the media at the time was entertaining, right? So
Mm.
so I think what I'm getting at is like you have to follow your own path, and um, and that's important. And whatever that path looks like, and I just it's tough for me to kind of in some ways even look at photography as sort of like another day job or another
Sure.
alternative kind of, because I know the amount of struggle and passion it
Yeah.
takes. And I mean, on a more like cynical note, I would say like you want to, really propel yourself to the top of the game. Just, get really, really good at being denied. Get really, really good
Mm.
at criticism, because
True.
you are going to have to put yourself out there so much more than you ever imagine and get shut down. And the sooner that you learn to accept and take criticism in a good way, and actually hear it and not become, whatever, upset, the more successful, and you'll find more success you'll find in this career path. I mean, it took me a long time to sort of listen to that and adhere to that.
I would say, kind of the echo that, the more comfortable you are with the discomfort, the more
Mhm.
successful you'll be. And honestly, the happier
Sure.
you'll be in the process.
I don't aspire to I don't aspire to bring a camera everywhere I go.
Okay.
Most
Why?
of life's most intimate experiences, I don't think, need to be documented all the time.
Okay.
And I feel like the way that I see it is like, this is a good enough device to
Okay.
capture and share most of life's really intimate moments. Um, for me, when I'm taking a camera, it often, has kind of transformed into something different. It's not just like I got a point and shoot film camera and I'm going out there on assignment. You're schlepping a bag full of gear, oftentimes more gear than you want, and you're going somewhere remote. And so what that does is it creates a lot of filters, and sort of a lot of barriers in terms of having like a very vulnerable, unique experience. And I guess what I'm getting at is that I know there is a fine line between the two. There's a way to achieve both. But for me, going out and shooting something that is a legitimate commercial assignment, I'm not really going with the expectation like I'm going to leave with some kernel of truth being bestowed upon me from nature,
Mm.
right?
Mm.
And yet, that's what I love the most in life, is being able to go out with my kids and experience something, or go out and do an expedition, or whatever, go ride my bike. I don't know. Um, so when I get the chance to combine the two, I feel like I'm oftentimes on more of a personal project. I'm out there. I'm doing to do some kind of a bike ride through a remote, wild area, and what I'm taking with me is a very minimal kit. Sometimes it's an Sony RX100 point and shoot. Sometimes it's an Xperia smartphone because it's got a 1-inch sensor. Sometimes it's a GoPro. Um, often more often than not, it's not a DSLR or a mirrorless
Right.
camera, or the A7 V with the, I mean, I don't need that stuff. And what is fascinating to me is that some of my better known images and better known work has been shot with like prosumer bodies, because it's just
Mhm.
what I had at the time, and it's what I actually cared about using, and it's what I was willing to use. And I think I said this before on the podcast, but I think that the best camera is not the one you have with you, it's the one you're willing to pull out in the moment. Because if you have an A1 in the bottom of your backpack and you don't want to put that, heavy backpack down to get it out, what's the point of having it, right?
Personally, for you, how has your mindset and your personality helped you to succeed?
Oh, well, it's changed over the years. Like, I don't think
Okay.
that I'm the same person that I was when I started this career path
Sure.
20, almost 15, 16 years ago. Um, I was very much like, I will sacrifice sleep, health, friends, everything you can imagine to be successful and to be the best and to be whatever. I was out, you know, a man on fire ready to prove to the world. And I think a lot of that came from the fact that how I grew up and my upbringing and sort of who I was as a person without getting into the details of that. But I
Right.
think as I've kind of gotten older and done some therapy and some self work, I've realized that like I don't need to be that person. I can still maintain really strong friendships, and I can still maintain like health, and I can still maintain a sense of awareness of what my own body needs. And because like I mean, I remember vividly like being on shoots where I was like waking up in the middle of the night, couldn't sleep, having anxiety attacks, like feeling my hair like thinning, or I was like, going through it and like pulling out clumps of hair and being like, what's
Yeah.
going on? I'm 25 years old. Like, how in the world am I experiencing this? And so I guess what I'm saying is like, I realize what it does, it can ask of you if
Mhm.
you give it that. But but I think that now I'm just trying to work a bit smarter and not harder, right? To
Okay.
be a bit more intelligent, because I would like to do this for the rest of my life and not just,
Sure.
you know, burn out in my 30s. That would be ideal. And I also like enjoy living life. And I read a book called Essentialism by Greg McKeown, and that book probably was the single most important like factor in looking at how I operate my
Why
business
is that?
now, and just because it asks certain questions. It's basically
Uh-huh.
like it's the best book I've ever written. I've read it like 3 or 4 times. I've suggested it to thousands of people, and I know it's changed a lot of people's lives. And I would also say that it what it does is it just asks very poignant questions about what you should be spending your time on, what is actually essential in your life. It's kind of like a self analysis of maybe
Mm.
where our efforts are best used, and the whole book is about doing less but doing better, right? And I think
Right.
that for most of us, we take on more than we should. And what ends up happening is that out of those things that we take on, quite a few of them suffer. So yeah, it's kind of that book that really poses that question, like, just because you have the opportunity to do something doesn't really mean you should, and
Mm.
did you ever stop to ask if you should? Did you
Mm.
always just take it, because it was there? And coming from like a, blue collar background where I watched my parents struggle to like make money and wanted to like never have that same fear or issue, I feel like I just, you know, became a workaholic, and that's really tough to accept and to kind of internalize and to break the habit.
Well, I mean, you and I have probably both seen it happen to other photographers several times. You mentioned the word burnout, taking on too much, trying to do it all.
Yeah.
Let me ask you this. When is the right time to, I don't want to say like hire somebody because not
Yeah.
everybody is in that situation where they can afford to do that, but let's say
Right.
outsource some of your efforts and some of your work?
That's an excellent question. I actually have a pretty like straightforward answer for this too.
Okay.
The moment that you feel like there are enough requests or enough
Mm.
asks of your time that you cannot fulfill all of them.
Mhm.
But asterisk here, like it's not about just because there are opportunities. It's because you are actually losing money
Mm.
because you are not fulfilling those. So like for me, what did that look like? It looked like I was on a shoot. I was on a trip somewhere, and I remember a magazine reaching out and being like, "We have this photo of yours. Like, we need the high res. Can you send it over? It's for the cover." And I was like, "Oh my god! Like, I'm not back for 5 days, and I missed the opportunity." And I was like, "That's ridiculous. Like, I'm never going to let that happen again." And so I didn't hire somebody. What I did was I trained somebody on how to use my system. It was just a friend. It was like somebody that I knew, and I was like, "Hey, if something comes up, can I call you so you can go send this image to whoever?" Because this was before. I mean, they were. It was probably out, but before like remote access to computers,
Right.
and all that. But realistically, I was in places where I couldn't have even really use that anyway. So I needed to have somebody where I could like forward them an email and be like, "Go to my office or go to my computer, you know, and send this file."
Mhm.
Right. And so that's how it started. And I would just pay that person hourly. I'd pay whatever, $20 an hour. I don't know. And if you're getting a cover that's worth 300-400 bucks, like it kind of makes a lot of sense. The
Sure.
hard part is just training that person and taking that time. And I think what I realized that after I trained that person, I was like, well, this is pretty convenient. They know how my system works, right? And I started to find other stuff. I'm like, oh, can you help organize these images? Can you do this? And then all of a sudden I started shooting jobs where I was, shooting thousands and thousands of images. You go shoot an automotive shoot where you're shooting thousands of plates for a
Mm,
car,
mhm.
where they're going to potentially like superimpose this thing in there. You better hope that you're not the one doing the post processing for that, because that's going to consume weeks of your time. And so I realized very quickly, I'm like, I can't continue to take on more jobs or more work. If that was the case right now, I would still be editing a job that we shot like 3 months ago because we're so backed up,
Yeah.
right? So I hired a photo editor, and I hired somebody who could kind of go through, and basically I would set the look and they would go through and they would start processing these images. And ultimately these assistants or assisting roles became part-time, then full-time. And that was a very slow process. I mean, it wasn't like I just all of a sudden hired 5 employees. I hired one person, as a very part-time situation, and then that became, more and more and more. So